I'm thinking of A Woman Under the Influence,
Mm.
or even Opening Night.
Gina Rowlands.
Yeah, those characters. Although A Woman Under the Influence is more similar to this, I would say,
Mm.
to Red Desert. But anyways, she said in that Cassavetes wanted to make it into a play, and she said, no way could I do that every
Just too
night.
intense.
So it feels like one of those characters. It's similar to the Joker, where everybody who plays it's such a mythologized character that everybody always references as being too difficult to play, of course. And how everybody always says, be careful when you do that character to the next person that does it. It reminds me of that in some way. I can imagine Monica Vitti telling Rollins, be careful. Cool. All right, so here we are. Today we're doing Red Desert, talking about Antonioni's first film in color. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. And by the way, I'm Jay Brooks Young.
And I'm Zach Domes. This is Some Like It Unauthorized.
It's Michelangelo Antonioni.
That's
It's a
pretty
good long Italian name. You gotta try the pronunciation out.
Yeah, and whenever they say it, that doesn't sound the same. They say it so quick and it just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful language.
Yeah, it is. I could only imagine talking that way. Yeah, I had gotten to see this like a month or two ago at a screening, which was really fun. It's a great time to be just like trapped in a theater with a film like this that just wants to like make you go crazy. And so I rewatched for this pod. But this was your first time, Zach. What were your reactions?
Yeah, I was, because we both also watched his trilogy that he does before this, Le Clis and La Notte and Le Adventura, and so prepared for kind of a meandering, flowing, various scenes kind of flowing together in an intriguing way, not really caring about the story so much as the experience of kind of wandering through the modern world, the changing modern world, and how our humanity is kind of getting lost in that in some sense. And so I was prepared for that to some degree, but it feels like with this, he dials it up even further. And if you include this film almost as an extension to the trilogy, it kind of feels like it could be kind of a epilogue in a way to what he does before this.
Yeah.
Because he just dials it up. He just digs in a little further, and it really shows us the neuroses that was sort of under the surface with the trilogy characters. Here he really exposes kind of an anxiety and a dread right on the surface.
Yeah. I think it's very easy to want to tie those neuroses that the Monica Vitti character has into this, industrial landscape and all this sort of alien and uninviting, stuff that you're seeing. I think it's very easy to kind of connect those together. And it's curious because when he talked about this film, he said that he wasn't trying to make that connection, actually. He wasn't trying to say that, like, these neuroses are caused by this landscape or this sort of modern age, He was more, the way that he expressed it more was that, like, this was just change. This was just progress. It wasn't necessarily positive or negative, but he called it something like a revolution where some people are going to suffer greatly, some people are going to adapt. This is obviously a character that suffers greatly from the modern age, but that that he didn't want. He just wanted to observe someone going through that, not necessarily prescribe something about the contemporary life, which is very interesting. It's not. I understand what he says there, but I don't know that I agree, that I come away feeling that way.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you used the word alien, and I watched it with my wife, and there were a couple times where she was like, "Are we on planet Earth in this film?
Yeah,
Like, where are we even?" It feels very much like the characters are in a landscape that is, uh, yeah, otherworldly. Um, and I agree with you. I think although his intention may have been something more close to that, to a kind of balanced view. I agree with you. I don't. Yeah, by the end of it, you don't. There's not necessarily a feeling of this place is for anybody really. I mean, the character that she's kind of interacting with for most of the time, the male character, he has the kind of balancing empathy, or he has the perspective that this world isn't as bad as she sees it, and he says things like, "Well, everyone suffers." So there is that attempt to put him in that kind of perspective of that Antonioni's going for there. But yeah, it doesn't feel like that's really the main. It doesn't feel like that's really that important, or even yeah, interesting.
yeah, and this is a film where I wonder how quote unquote normal people, people who don't, people who have like jobs,
Yeah, yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
really relate. Yeah, neither of us are really normal job people, but yeah, just like how would they react to a film like this, you know? Because this feels relatable to me. This sense of just like a world that you can't understand, that just it feels harsh, and I mean, it feels so relatable because it's just like this is what the world has been, for the 60 years since this came out. Like it's
Right.
yeah, we live in this climate change. um I don't know. This is
Yeah. Yeah, climate change and corporatization everywhere, just forever. It seems like any kind of anything that you may find that you end up liking, it might be something as simple as like a little sandwich shop or whatever it might be. All these things are so vulnerable to some corporation or whatever you might call it, kind of taking over and you know cleaning it up and making it systematized in some way. It's like the suburban, the old suburban neighborhoods. I think of. I live in a kind of old suburban neighborhood, and every house is different. Like it's like they contracted different people to be able to build different houses or something. Whereas nowadays, every new suburb looks exactly the same. Every house is a cookie cutter of the next one next door. Um, yeah, the world just there's a gravity, a kind of a gravitational pull towards um, this kind of brutalist modernization that we can't escape for some reason. And although it may be beneficial to some people, it certainly has seemed to be causing certain issues among the general population. One of those issues is exactly what the main character, Monica, goes through in this film. It's this neuroses, this kind of wondering, who am I? What am I? She's forgetting her humanity, um, which we're
right.
seeing all around us
Yeah,
today.
it's
Yeah.
it's how it's what the her sort of love interest, the Richard Harris character, says, that everyone kind of goes through something like this to different extents.
Yeah.
Yeah, the industrialization and this sort of this global sort of economic shift. I mean, there's so many different parts of this film that kind of comment on that and point towards it. You have towards the beginning when her husband is getting on the phone looking for workers, and it's like we get businessman calling different businessman in quick succession, and giving you this sense of this kind of disposability and this easy transplanting of workers as if they were just like parts that you could put on a boat and send somewhere, and these are people. And that later scene when he's meeting with the workers about sending them to South America is incredible, because there's that part where it gives sort of a POV and, looks across at their different faces. And it's like, it's sort of daunting, I imagine, to his character at that moment to look at them a little closer and kind of grapple with the fact that these are people who you're asking to just leave whatever home they have and just be completely unmoored from their lives for the sake of work, for the sake of some larger company or corporation. Like, it's all this sort of scary modern phenomenons, phenomena going on that scary stuff.
Yeah, and this whole time throughout that whole throughout all of these sort of experiences and different narratives, we're surrounded by the architecture, the kind of sometimes painted on set design.
Mm-hmm.
He's painting on the walls. I think there's that one scene where he paints the fruit all gray, something like that, on that cart. And so you're surrounded by this kind of gray with little dashes of color and very, very modernist. Reminds me of like Rothko or something, where everything is straight edged and it's all very, very industrial, but just with those little touch of color. It's disorienting often the way he shoots it. You have these cuts that go from one scene to the next, and I was thinking of his trilogy didn't do that. I often felt with his trilogy that the cuts went really well together, and this one was different because I sometimes was disoriented. I was like, well, where are we now, and where are we headed to? This is odd, and I felt so disoriented.
I agree. Yeah, they're like checking out a shack on like a pier or something, and then you have like a cut, and you don't realize immediately you're like in an entirely different shack now. But that's such a strange choice. You would never, switch shacks and not establish that in some way. Which, all of these things you can tie into her character and how she's experiencing things, especially the painted objects and buildings and things. That feels very explicitly like he's trying to reflect what's going on in her head. But it doesn't feel out of place with how the world around us is,
there is a relatability to it. Yeah. You go into a mall, and it's not the most welcoming place sometimes, or an airport. There's something weird about it. With his trilogy, much more so, he did strike that balance between comfort, kind of meandering through in a comfortable way through these large, clean, modernized places. Like, I think of an airport as a very classic example here, where you're sitting at the airport and it's comfortable. It's kind of pleasant. You're watching people pass by, but you don't know anybody. And this whole place sometimes feels ultra modern and empty. in a way. Sometimes you're there and it's completely empty, which is sort of this weird liminal feeling. And yet at the same time, you're not at danger. Like it's safe, and it's one of the safest places to be. Um, but with this, he just leans so heavily into the disorientation. There's fog. You never really know where you are. Half the time, she's going through a mixed bag of emotions, from paranoia to I was thinking of that long scene in the shack with that room that's painted red. She it's like this. She has to eat quail eggs to like feel turned on, right? Like this is how disoriented she is. Just like needs an external substance to help her. Yeah.
Yeah, in a sense, like she's forgotten how to interact with people and how to like read social interactions, and that
Right.
yeah, the quail eggs are like an easy sort of not exit, but like something to sort of understand the situation and say like, oh, that everyone wants me to do this. I can do this, and we'll all feel a certain way about it, and this interaction will be easier. And that lasts for a little bit, but then it gets kind of disrupted and aborted, and it all feels really strange and alien again. And that shot kind of in the later part of that scene where she's like looking at them all on the bed, but they're extremely out of focus, and then her head like rises into the shot in focus, the back of her head.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. Just like, oh gosh, I'm suddenly, alone. Suddenly I can't relate to any of these people again, The nightmares returned.
Yeah, right. And then later, another moment like that too, when they're in the fog and they're all out of focus.
Yeah. Followed
And a
by
lot
her almost driving into the ocean.
right, because she was lost, didn't know where she was going.
Yeah.
She describes to the guy earlier on about a patient that she came to know in the hospital that she was in, later revealing that was her.
Right.
There's this sense of there's a disassociative quality there, which is an experience that someone can have where they are a little disconnected from their sense of self, or very much disconnected from their sense of self or the world around them. And this is giving you kind of an experience of what that might be like to be disassociated, to not know who you are or where you are, to be talking about yourself like it's some other person. The whole thing, the whole film pretty much felt like that until the very end, and yeah, deeply unsettling in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's reminiscent of Vertigo. I thought of that film watching it this time because of those themes of sort of dissociation, and partially how it's shot as well, and the use of these long lenses and the way it kind of isolates, that center person in the frame, and of course the color, the use of color too. I wouldn't be surprised if he was thinking about that film.
Right. Yeah, the color is disorienting, which is it's artistic, but it's also disorienting. And I don't think this has to do with vertigo, but just to reiterate what you had said about the back of the head, that too gives you a disorienting, disassociative feeling, because you're seeing from the back of her head, almost a third person perspective, like a video game character, something like that.
Yeah, and you'll see that in some of other films of the era, especially like Godard, like Vivre sa vie, the Anna Karina, like back of her head shot. I feel like is a famous one from that film. But he leans so hard into it in this film, and it's great hair acting from Monica Vitti. Like, there's something about her hairstyle in this feels like, oh, I just had a breakdown. Like, I don't
Yeah,
even know
the
what to
whole
do with
time.
my hair anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. That's great. Yeah, and another film that it reminds me of, I don't think you've seen, is Safe by Todd Haynes.
No, I haven't.
So what he does there is he takes that sort of character, a character who is sort of paranoid, that there could be something wrong with them, and
Mm.
yeah, he creates this very unsettling film about a person like that, and this reminded me very much of that. I could almost guess, you can almost guarantee that this inspired that type of film for sure. Because yeah, he's leaning into a character who's paranoid, fully paranoid. And what was there was some quote she said oh well, there's a great quote in this movie. It was like she feels like light. There's something wrong about life, but she doesn't know what it is. Something like that.
Yeah, doesn't she say like no one will tell me what's
Yeah,
wrong with reality or something like that?
yeah, it's fundamental, right? It's pointing to a fundamental, um, like paranoia, which is it isn't. She's kind of calling out that it's not about anything in particular. It's just a feeling. Something feels wrong. It's not. I don't.
Yes.
Like she has these various pains and various lapses in memory, but all of that seems to extend from just a basis.
Her baseline?
Yeah, her baseline is anxiety. That's where all of the other things come from, and she doesn't know why
Yeah.
she's anxious, kind of feeling.
Yeah, and that feeling is reflected back at her by this world that is so complex, and we're sort of, I don't know, starting to see glimpses of this, start like seeing reminders, you know. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
the factories and, the way that they're, fabricating plastics and all these things, like um, you're reminded of like molecular physics and things. You're reminded that like there's an anatomic um, level of reality that we can't see or sense in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the radio array that she goes and sees, where they talk about this, we're listening to like stars and things like that's a huge scale that you can't like imagine or fathom, um, all these ways she's being reminded that like there's a world that is sort of impossible for us to wrap our minds around. um, and it feels like it gets more and more complex by the day, the more and more these sciences advance. um, and yeah, what she goes through feels like sort of a religious crisis in that way, where you can't understand why you are the way you are, why the world and why we feel this way, why people act this way, certain things happen. Like thinking
Mm-hmm.
about like that film Europa 51, the Rossellini, you know she kind of goes through a similar crisis that the Ingrid Bergman character goes through. But the Bergman's having like a religious sort of crisis of faith. Um, she's being disillusioned with what's happening around her and the suffering, and that feels religious. Um, in this case, it feels as far away from religion as it can get, but it's a very similar anxiety and existential crisis.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah, I'm even thinking of there's like a toy that the dad and the kid are playing with kind of earlier on in the film, and I think I might get this wrong, a gyroscope. Is that totally wrong?
That's what he says is
That's what he says.
inside. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a thing spinning on the inside in it, and it causes the toy to act in ways that are unintuitive to us.
Yeah.
Um, and I pointed out how to my wife. I pointed out how funny it is to see like a kind of a toy that we're familiar with now be kind of showcased in a film as though it was kind of just made back then. a lot of people back then may not have seen that kind of toy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't think of how that's yet another um, modern technological advancement, even though it's on a small scale. And they do mention that it's used for ships to these huge ships to be able to keep balance. So it can be used on a large scale too. But similarly, this is a thing that is unintuitive to us, and yet it's all around us. It's like telescopes or being able to pick up frequencies from so far away that it's impossible to comprehend. Physics operating on a level that's impossible to comprehend. These huge ships and huge factories all around us. Yeah, it's reminding
Even
us
even just
all the
to
time.
even just to that moment when the son asks her, "Hey, what's 1 + 1?" and he does the
Mm,
little droplets on the slide and says, "Isn't that one?" Like even the building blocks we can't be sure of. It's like she says at some point, I feel like, there's no ground beneath me. Just,
mm-hmm,
yeah, I'm in a void. And let's say, so yeah, I find it really interesting when she's, yeah, talking about the friend that she met in the hospital, but actually talking about herself and saying that she can't, they're telling her she has to learn to love something, her husband, her son, a dog, anything, and that she can't do that. And the son plays such an interesting role in the film because a lot of those disorienting edits make it seem like she's like running away from him and just abandoning him outside in the landscape, which is,
mm-hmm,
yeah, that was kind of funny but distressing at the same time. And she, there's the like health scare where he pretends that he can't feel his legs, and she gets
mm-hmm,
really upset about that. And you know you would think that would be the proof that she needs, that like, she loves her son, she cares about him. Like, she is so distraught in that moment, thinking that he's actually sick in some way.
mm-hmm,
um but then I think that scene ends with her like sort of running away and having this feeling of like, how could you pretend like this and like hurt me in this way. And she suddenly feels like very far away from her son, it seems.
mm-hmm,
um and I had the thought that it feels important that he is a boy, that he has all these sort of science-y toys and stuff, and that it would be a little more difficult to sort of love a son who is being raised sort of to exist in this modern world and kind of grow up to be like his father, and be this sort of champion of industry and destroy the world with all these factories and pollution and things. Like, it's kind of, I imagine it would be distressing to see your son growing up to be a little scientist like that. I feel like it's important that, yeah, that's a boy child, and he's being raised in that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, like on the one hand, she has all of her own neuroses, trying to hold it together and figure out who she is and where she is. And obviously, from that point of view, it's going to be hard to connect with love and connect with your experience of being a mother. Um, I like this other perspective too, where you know here she is trying to be a mother and raising a boy who is going to become part of this world that she's become disoriented by. So it's like, yeah, it puts into question like why we mother and who we mother and what and how important that is. Parents always seem to be the at center stage for a lot of local political issues for good reason, because they're raising their kids in an environment. So if certain policies are made to affect certain things, they're going to feel very overwhelmed and emotional and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if the world is changing to the degree that it did change in the mid century, I can't imagine how some people must have felt.
Yeah. Um,
And actually, that's one thing to think of. That reminded me of one thing, which is you said earlier that Antonioni might have been saying, "Hey, this is going to affect some people negatively, and some people are going to appreciate this changing world." And I think that's because it was changing. We don't know. They didn't. People back then didn't seem to know the real effect that this kind of change would have. We don't have today, for example, we don't have pollution, at least in a lot of the areas where pollution existed. It's been displaced, unfortunately, to other places. But we don't have that same kind of level of pollution in the rivers and things like that in a lot of city areas, let's say. But we have different effects that came from that, and I think it's still I think it's up to debate. I think it's still a question as to whether or not it's all good progress or not.
yeah. I do think it's complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like what he says about it, which is like it's not something that one can be against. In any case, there would be no point to being against it. Like it's kind of just a law of nature, a fact of life that this progress is happening. I think, I mean, that's been borne out. I think he's exactly right. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's less about being against it and more about adapting and making sense of it. And yeah, kind of like, I don't know, figuring out how to live in this world. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like the very last line, they're talking about the yellow poisonous smoke, and the boy says, "Well, what if the birds fly through it?" And she says, "Well, they're not going to because they learn. They're not that stupid to just keep killing themselves. Um, they realize after some amount of time, oh, yellow smoke bad. Fly in the clean air."
That also that could be just a euphemism too, for a child to say not that, all those birds that flew there are dead now. They went somewhere else. They're still alive. They just learned. It's kind of ambiguous, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by the way, that smoke is painted, right?
I figured,
yeah.
I mean, just to talk about that color,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this feels so innovative. I don't know that other films were kind of putting you in this realism, this grounded story, but then manipulating the this, not the sets, but manipulating the setting with color in this way. And I watched this and immediately thought, oh, like Antonioni had this in mind when he was making Solaris, the color and this like alien soundscape that they're using as well.
I think you said just now, you said Antonioni was thinking of this when he made Solaris, so I think you meant Tarkovsky.
Tarkovsky, yeah. Like a lot of directors, I think, are going to look at this, and it's like important that these guys start their careers working in black and white, and that when they get to color, they are thinking really intentionally about how they're going to use it. And it's kind of incredible. It sort of you're taken aback, like when you see that fruit cart painted gray and the different things, the pink room near the end.
Yeah.
It's really striking.
Tarkovsky had to have been inspired by this, because this is one of the most Tarkovsky-esque films I've seen prior to Tarkovsky.
Yeah.
It was very, that was sort of a surprise. I don't think that I was expecting expecting that, and so that
Yeah,
was nice.
yeah. Stalker too. The use of a radiated landscape in that
Hmm.
film is very similar to how he uses this industrial landscape.
Yeah, and also just the kind of the ways in which you feel out of time. You know,
Hmm.
it didn't have the same exact feeling, of course, that Tarkovsky can give with something like Stalker, but there was it was reminiscent of kind of feeling out of time in that way that Tarkovsky does. What is his phrase? Sculpting time. It felt like with this Antonioni was leaning in even more into that experience. But as you were saying that, I'm realizing the key difference between the trilogy and this film is this is a different place. This is a whether or not it's alien or it's Earth or whatever. It is very different. It's more of a set feeling. It feels like it is away from society. It's just a totally different society. Whereas the trilogy was all part of society. This is uh, an otherworldly place.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. This is it's. He was really familiar with this region that he films in because it was close to his hometown of Ferrara. Um, and I watched Il Grido in preparation for this as well, his film before La Ventura,
Mm.
which is also kind of set in a similar region, but um, well, they both deal with industrialization and industrialization.
Hmm.
This is on another level, but yeah, he was just totally aware of the way that this region industrialized and completely changed in the span of his lifetime. Um, so he's putting
Hmm.
that all on display, um, and it's
Mm.
it feels like this was this moment when the Italian economy is sort of booming back after World War II, and everyone would be thinking about that in positive terms. This is positive economic growth. We're doing well, but this feels like it reflects the underbelly of that. This sort of, I don't know, kind of nightmare underneath that, and what the ill effects of that can be, the pollution and all these things, the displacement
Hmm.
of workers, all of that.
Yeah, and that's all in very much contrast to this little moment within the film where the mother Monica is describing a story of some child on a beach, kind of an Eden-esque uh, scenario where it's
Yeah,
just this
that.
child and the earth is singing to her, and this very
Yeah,
haunting but beautiful um, melody. And the earth is also human like. She says at some point she didn't realize how human the the sandstone was. It looked like bodies. Um,
yeah.
Kind of a beautiful little contrast to put within the industrialization of the rest of the film.
It is, yeah, because the film is able to kind of quiet for the first time. You aren't hearing those ship horns or construction or whatever in the background.
Hmm.
Um, it's a totally different feeling. It's a really cool effect to put in there. Just like
Hmm.
this is what we can imagine the world being. This is what comfort would be, but that's nowhere to be found in the real world or in the rest of this film at least.
Hmm. Instead, yeah.
Um,
And so now you're reminding me. Instead of uh, comfort, and one of the things you hear off in the distance is not just the boats, sounds, and everything, but in that one moment you hear that scream, and I thought that
yeah,
was interesting because you hear this scream, and I
that's
thought to
when they're
myself,
all in the cabin with the red
yeah,
bedroom, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, which is a whole wild scene where they
Yeah,
start
I
tearing
mean
it
that's
down.
kind of my favorite scene that
Yeah,
sequence in the whole film.
yeah, for sure. The way that he every kind of fluid. The other thing is that that's the most. That's more similar to the trilogy. There's something very grounding about that because you know where you are the whole time, and it's kind of fun in a way. It's all these people together. It's the most communal part of the film. It's when she's again with other people. Super fun though, in that they start breaking the thing down and using it as firewood.
Yeah.
For heat. And then there's that scream that is heard off camera, nobody mentions. And then they see the ambulance and stuff, and then somebody goes, "Yeah, I heard a scream." I thought that was very strange because I was like, that was really my experience where I was like, I swear I heard a scream too. Like, what was that?
Right. Yeah.
And it's a scream that happens off camera from somebody who we never meet, we don't know. That's kind of another thing in regards to what you're saying, where in a context where everybody's together, street level, they're all together being humans. If somebody gets hurt, people tend to that person in a kind of communal way. They go, something's happening here. This person's not okay. We all need to rally together to help this person. But in a modern industrialized setting like this, when someone gets hurt, you just have to trust that the system takes care of them in the background. Like you're like,
right.
Everyone's like, it's fine. She's getting taken care of. Don't worry about it. But she has this kind of primal, more humanistic, really, feeling of like, no, we should tend to that person. They were screaming. Are they okay? What's going on there? That's kind of a feeling that we have today too. We're like seeing all these sort of bad things happening in the news constantly, and we're all like, we should help these people. We should help these situations that are going on. And then there's this other voice within society that's like, it's getting taken care of. Don't worry. It'll all get worked out. Don't worry. It's all gonna be okay.
Yeah, there's this idea that she's a neurotic character, but I do think it's more human. It's not being able to just like block out the stimuli that is distressing to you. There's a reason, you want to react when you hear a cry or you feel bad if you're looking at, a bunch of polluted, discolored, land. All of these things are very human that we have learned to suppress in the modern age.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something too about that group in the cabin being these sort of like upper middle class people that they all like own factories or manage factories or whatever. And they are sort of isolated from the working world. And at that point, they are literally isolated in that cabin. And, it feels like they get to sort of relax and have this strange, like flirtation among themselves, because that's what that wealth affords you the ability to do. But I don't know. There's so many little interesting aspects to how they interact in that scene, because I feel like it's important that they don't consummate this like orgy thing that feels like it's starting to happen, that like they don't know how to do that, or they don't feel like it's right. There could be a million reasons, but like
they could be bored of it,
Yeah.
They fall asleep.
Yeah.
Some of them fall asleep. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when they start pulling the boards apart to build the fire, that feels like it's like this fun thing at that moment, but it's destructive. It feels analogous to how they approach their jobs and their lives, where they're building these factories and tossing this pollution out, and it's all sort of haphazard, and there's not really a reason behind it. They're gonna pull this like cabin apart just because it feels like something to do. They, it almost feels like because they didn't, none of them had sex, like the men now want to let off the steam and, show how manly they are pulling the cabin apart. And, there's something to be connected there between these urges that these, men of industry have and how those get sublimated into fucking the world,
Right,
like,
right.
yeah,
Well, what's left of the old world? Because the cabin is like the one remaining original building, it feels like, made out of wood. Everything else around it is cement and metal.
yeah,
And then it's like inside that is the one remaining place where they all connect in an intimate way. And it's the thing that's destroyed. It's the thing that they break down.
yeah. And
Interesting.
but then all those boards pulled away just make the red more prominent in the frame, and it's like it's speaking to them,
Oh.
but they can't, they're not doing anything about it.
And
Yeah,
also, yeah, and it's more red because we see it, which means that becomes more vulnerable. There's a kind of a vulnerability to this new world. It's more exposed.
mm,
Yeah, you're no, you're no, you're you know, this is maybe a stretch to say, but surveillance and just what you do and who you are uh, becomes more public in this world as well, in a certain kind of way. Um, Again, it's not communal, right? Like it's not communal. It's more like petri dish. Like before, in a world before this, what you did was known by others in a real kind of empathetic way, a real understood and connected way. I'm thinking of long ago history, and in the modern world, what you do is more just sort of examined.
yeah,
It's
yeah. I think that's right. And privacy feels like it's a privilege that
mhm.
comes with class.
Yes, yes, especially in the cities, especially in the city. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of that seems a little more similar to the trilogy, and it feels very real and natural. Like I don't know. It's just like it's incredible. I don't know how you would even write a scene like that the way that it plays out so organically. Um, but that makes me think about how my first reaction to this film was to feel like the performance that Monica Vitti is giving is a little, I don't know, it's a little it's stilted or unnatural. It's a difficult like character to play, um, and like part of me had a struggle with it, and there are also moments where the fact that that all this dialogue and stuff is recorded in post doesn't help it because she's like recording those little whimpers and things
Yeah.
that I think never sound very good. It's kind of the reason that you record sound on location in films,
Yeah.
the more contemporary films. But
Hmm.
like,
Yeah. The film I referenced, Safe, by Todd Haynes. Um, who is the woman who plays it? Oh no, I'm forgetting her name. She's got red
uh,
hair.
is it Julianne Moore?
That's Julianne Moore. She said that after playing that character, she had to have like therapy sessions, something like that, to kind of
Mm,
work through what an intense character that is and what an intense experience the character is going through. Similarly, I'm thinking of A Woman Under the Influence,
mm.
or even Opening Night, where the characters that she plays, Cassavetes, um,
Gina Rollins.
yeah, those characters with A Woman Under the Influence, it's similar to An Opening Night in a way, just where there's like kind of a panic. Although A Woman Under the Influence is more similar to this, I would say,
Mm,
to Red Desert. But anyways, she said in that Cassavetes wanted to make it into a play, potentially, to have had made that film into something that they could have done on stage. And she said, no way. No way could I do that every
Just too
night.
intense.
So it feels like one of those characters. It's similar to the Joker, where everybody who plays it's such a mythologized character that everybody always references as being too difficult to play, of course. And how everybody always says, be careful when you do that character to the next person that does it. It reminds me of that in some way. I can imagine Monica Vitti telling Rollins, be careful. It's a very tough character to play, and I agree with you. I thought it was challenging at times, even overacted at times. But
yeah,
what a challenge it would have been. I can't imagine.
Yeah, I appreciate what the film's going for, and Antonioni is kind of a divisive director. I feel like you're either bought in with what he's trying to do or you're not. So like I'm someone who's ready to give the film some grace and go along for the ride. Some people are going to bounce off of this film to the utmost degree, And if we want to think about why that is, like, I think he's one of these directors in the 60s who's like going into his career and thinking about making films as art and trying to be an artist, first and foremost. He started his career, he wrote a screenplay with Rossellini way back when Rossellini was making the war films for the fascist Italian regime. But he basically gets started post World War II when it's Rossellini and De Sica and Visconti all making these neorealist films and giving the next generation a kind of roadmap to think about films as something beyond entertainment. Antonioni does not approach making his films with a thought towards them being entertaining, and so he's crafting the film in very unintuitive ways compared to the way that just an entertaining film for regular people is. So the films themselves are off-putting if you're not going to allow yourself to kind of buy into them, and that's always going to be there, that sort of barrier for some people. But I love sitting down with a film like this and just being like, let's feel this discomfort and let's think about what's going on in the world.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's just to name something that I heard recently. Reminds me of something I heard recently, which is some people come to film on the one side of the aisle just for entertainment, and that's great and that's fine. And some people come to it in various other ways, one in which is to be challenged. Because if it's a great film, it means the challenge will have been worth it. Worth it in a way that is sometimes hard to understand to certain people. But you finish a film like this, and you're not going to say, that was fun. That was a fun time. You finish it feeling, wow. You feel inspired and intrigued, and that's what good art does. Good art, obviously, is not roses and dolphins and cliche, Art is constantly a threat to our intuitions, to our hoping for things to be easy. And it pulls us down into the subconscious. It pulls us into this place that is where both the light and the dark meet. Anybody going just for light, you're gonna come up against walls in your life in other ways. But if you've ever been able to experience the the friction between light and dark in great art, and you fully feel in awe of that, then that's why you would keep coming back to great film or great literature or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and that's not to say that people that are interested in challenging experiences and films as art can't dislike or sort of feel that this film or his films in general are don't reach the level that they need to. Like that's perfectly fine to feel that way. I think some people do feel that they are a little too deliberate, a little too sort of massaged, and that he's sort of, I don't know, taking out the spontaneity from them. I think you had used that word rigid to describe Kubrick last week, and you might use that for Antonioni too.
Right.
So like right. That's a perspective some people will have on his films.
True. One last thing I might say is that we're going to be talking about Varda, Agnes Varda, at some point coming up here. And she was a photographer, or she studied photography before she started doing film, I think. And with Antonioni, though, I don't know what his background with photography was. Maybe he did some. I don't know if he has a lot of photographs necessarily that were saved from before his work in film. But what I would say about him is he was a photographer with his films. Like, he has a photographer's eye. It's such a joy as a photographer to watch every frame. Every frame is as though it's being shot as a photograph, in very new and interesting ways. That's just
I think I heard him talk not about photography but about sketching, that he would draw a lot throughout his life, and that he was always interested in architecture and drawing like facades of buildings and walls and little streets and things. And he's always thinking about the landscape. That's maybe the first thing he's thinking about in these films is the landscape.
What it feels like, yeah.
Yeah. He's a perfect sort of offspring of neorealism in that way. Like, he was made to go out and make films in interesting locations and find those interesting sort of photos out in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So this film went to Venice and won the Golden Lion. It was another success for him. And after this, he gets a contract with a Hollywood studio and goes and makes his English language film Blow Up. So, this is a landmark for him, using color for the first time. It's also his last film with Monica Vitti, but he kind of goes in a totally new direction after this. We've seen it in the 50s and the 60s, where there's a lot of commingling of Hollywood and Italian film industry. But here's a guy off to the big lights of Hollywood to go butt heads with them. Good luck.
Yeah, well, and I've heard good things, so sometimes it wasn't always successful, and in this case I think it was to some degree a success, so yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah. But next week will be something very different, because we are going to be covering Satyajit Ray's 64 film Charulata. We watched Pather Panchali and loved it. And you've been catching up with a couple more of his films.
Mm-hmm. Great. Here's another director who had a thematic trilogy. Actually, no, it was more than just thematic. It was the life and of a. In the first film, a young boy becomes a young man. In the second and third film, but another trilogy director who will be talking about a film that they did after that. Yeah, looking forward to watching that. I'm a huge fan of this director, so.
Yeah, he's one of a kind. Like, everyone needs to check out his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I am so excited to watch this and see what he's up to in the mid 60s.
Yeah, you have some catching up to do. So.
Well, that's yeah. he was prolific though, man. He kept working.
He did.
But yeah, this is one of his that ends up on the Sight and Sound. So we'll see what the reason for that is.
All right. Till next time.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in. Follow us at our letterboxed Jae-yoon and Hechi. Links in the description. Come take a look. All right.
All right.